We are live. JT here. Welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's so that we can learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. Again, folks, I just wanted to thank you for joining me today, whether you're tuning in live and watching it in the Facebook community, whether you are listening to the replay on the podcast. Again, super grateful for you being here with me today. And I am really enthused for my guest. My guest today is someone who I've gotten to know a little bit over the last few months. And again, that's one of the blessings of this interesting time in human history. It's given us an opportunity to slow down and really get to know some different people and meet some new people. My guest today in the huddle is Coach D'Amour. How are you, Coach?
Very good, JT. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, been looking forward to our conversation. I know we briefly met through the Ontario football, and really I really want to learn more about you and share your journey to greatness. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and I enjoy the show.
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, before I start, I always like to send a sense of appreciation and gratitude. The one thing that I have really come to enjoy about you, Coach, is I really get a sense for how much you invest into people, how much you value relationships. And it's really been a great opportunity to remind you about what the game of life is really about. It's really about building relationships and really helping people. So thank you for providing me with that great reminder.
Well, I appreciate that, JT.
Okay. So we always like to start the huddle by having a little fun. As I often say, life is a game. Games are supposed to be fun. So I'm curious, what is one interesting fact? Maybe it's like a quirk you have that not a lot of people know about you that you would feel comfortable sharing with the community.
Oh, geez. That's tough. I don't know. I guess if I look at coaching and stuff like that, I'm really, again, I have a bit of an OCD and things like that. I'm very, I guess it's like quirky in the sense of like, when it comes to being at home and stuff like that, like I'm a cleaning freak. Like I like to clean a lot. I actually enjoy cleaning, which I get harassed often about and things like that. But yeah, I'm one of those guys. I'm pretty simple. I don't to do a lot. Besides my family and work, and obviously, when I'm coaching and things like that. But I do actually enjoy cleaning. I find it relaxing. I will spend a day just cleaning the house and listening to music and doing stuff like that. When I coached, my players would laugh at me. The locker room was always super clean, and I was always in there doing stuff, and they would kind of joke around. I'd walk by and one of the locks were not thing, and I'd fix it, and they would just like kind of notice that I do that a lot and little things like that. So I guess for me is I kind of have like an enjoyment for cleaning and making sure things look tidy and stuff like that. So I guess if there's something quirky, that would be it.
And I love that you shared that. And one thing I've really come to appreciate at this stage of my life is really everything in life is divine timing. And some of the things you talked about liking, cleaning and doing things in a certain way, I think it speaks volumes about that athlete mindset, attention to detail. So and I also love cleaning too. So I feel we're common people.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's not very common in most people. I think most people wouldn't choose cleaning as something that they enjoy doing during the course of the day. But yeah, it's just something, again, it's been, like you kind of said, as you got older and more mature, like obviously I was a typical, college football player. Your house was messy, your room was messy and all that kind of stuff. But as I got older and, maybe having kids and all that kind of stuff, I just became more, entrenched in making sure things look good and present well. And even as a coach, that was very important to me when I first took over the program at Windsor, was to make sure that visibly what people saw was something pleasing to the eye. I put a lot of murals up on the walls there. I fixed the hallway. I, made sure my office was clean, 24/7. I made sure the assistant office was clean and all that stuff. And really it was just visually, this is what people see. They don't get to see your everyday work and how much effort you're putting in. But if they come in your office and it looks like a pigsty, for me, it presented that, like, are you unorganized? Do you know how to run a program and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So it was always like, for me, you never know who was going to visit, whether it was an alumnus, a donor, or anything like that. And you always wanted to make sure that visibly it was presentable. And I got into that as a coach, and then it just carried over. And then when I left, my house became my cleaning area, and that's kind of what where I'm at right now.
Okay, I love it. So, Coach, you've had a very diverse path, right? You've played at a high level, you've coached at a high level, multiple high levels. I'm really curious, what role has sport played for you in your life?
I think you kind of mentioned it at the very beginning. It's really about the relationships that I've built through sport. Obviously, starting off with your colleagues and your coaches, and the people that you brought in as on your staff, as a head coach, and even before that, some of the mentors that I had through sport, and then the players, the relationships that you build over high school. Obviously, you don't spend nearly as much time as you do at the university level, but you're still spending a lot of time with them. And really, for me, out of the 15, 16 years of coaching, if I had to pick one thing that I got out of all of it, is the relationships. And I kind of tell my, kids, obviously, as they grow up, they meet different people, and who's their best friend now is maybe not their best friend 5 years from now. And I kind of just mentioned to them that, like, really for me, sport was where my relationships were built. I kind of said, when I got married, everyone that came to my wedding was from my football program at the University of Windsor. Even though I got married 6 years after I finished playing, all the people that I invited, besides family and stuff, were all either members of my football team or staff that, I got to build with, or guys that I was currently coaching with and things like that. That's really where everything came from. In this day and age, I think sport really gives you that opportunity to build relationships. It puts you in tough situations with people. You've got to make tough decisions. They're stress related, pressure, situations. You have a lot of free time together, especially at the university level. You're in an office all day, doing things and hanging out. I just feel that that's what you get the most out of sport. I think you look at kids and you ask kids what you get out of it, they're going to mention their teammates and their relationships they have and all that stuff. So I really believe that's what I've gotten the most out of sport over the last, plus playing time over 20 years, 25 years, is the relationships that I've had with players, coaches, even parents of former players that I still have relationships with, that I still talk to every day. Whether it was through recruiting, and then I built a relationship with their parents, and then all of a sudden we became friends, and we had, like you mentioned, a lot of mutual, things that we agree on, and personality traits. And that's kind of where I'm at, probably what I got the most out of sport.
And I love that you really simplify it. And I love your perspective on it, because that was something that I would often mention to players and coaches as well, is, when the game ends, and that's what I love about football, as you know, has a really short window, right? Like our time, it's not like men's league hockey or men's league soccer where you can kind of
or
play,
basketball or whatever, yeah.
Right? And football's really there. And I said, you might not necessarily miss the game. You might a little bit game day, but what you'll really miss are those opportunities where you're hanging out in the locker room, right? Where you're sitting down in the cafeteria, where you're doing the off-season lifts together. And it's really those connections, those bonds, that brotherhood that you talked about, that really is the beauty of sport.
Yeah. And again, I always kind of used to tell my kids, like, if anyone besides using Google, who could tell me won the Vanier Cup 6 years ago, if you say Laval, you're buying good guess. You might have a shot there. There's a 50% chance that you're right. But most of the time, you probably don't know unless you Google it. But I'll tell you right now, you'll probably remember, 5-6 years ago, your teammate that you came in as a rookie with, 5 years ago, and they're still next to him in a locker and hanging out and maybe, working a part-time job together and going to class together and all that stuff. So that's the big thing. Like, people don't, even as a coach, I laughed. People don't remember what my record is. And to be honest, I don't even know what my record is. I'd have to, do the math and figure it out. But that's not something that, sits on me and something I'm going to share with my kids when I'm older, that, hey, my record was this. It's more about like, hey, meet this guy. He was a teammate or he was a former player of mine. And now, I'm 8 years as a coach, and then 3 years out, a lot of my first year kids, the kids like, Austin Kennedy and those guys that I came in with, Austin just had his second child, he's worked, he's married. And those are kind of things that, I get to see now. Some of these kids that came in, 19, 20 years old, as freshmen are now, in relationships and getting married and having children and, calling me, hey, can I get a reference for, this job application, all that. And I've done hundreds of references and stuff like that. And that's what I remember. Those are the things that are important to me, the relationships that I built with those kids, as opposed to, how many games we won, during the course of their career. And I think as people get older, they start to realize, and again, I'm not making excuses. It sounds like, oh, that's a guy, you have won games, that's why you don't care. That's not true. I did care about winning and it was important to me, but it really was important that the kids grew up, and after their 5 years, they say they got something out of playing, whether it was from me or from the relationships that they built, through football. And that was more important to me than, the winning and losing, because ultimately 15, 20 years from now, no one will remember how many games I won.
Mm-hmm. No, and you really bring up a great point there. And last week I chatted with Coach Flaxman in the huddle.
Yes.
And we talked about that old OUA tagline, the CH, right? Champions for life. And that's really what I believe in the power of sport is, right? It's about creating champions in the game of life.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, you have coached at multiple levels, and your path to coaching was a little unconventional, but that's what I love. I love stories that, it's not following the status quo. It's blazing your own path. And that's what I've loved. You've coached at high school, you've coached at the OPFL level, you've coached Team Ontario, Team Canada, and at the CIS level. I'm curious, what has been the biggest takeaway for you in that whole experience? Like, does it really differ that much? Like, obviously there's certain things you're dealing with, different level of athlete, but really when you strip it all away, creating success at the high school level versus at the international level, is it really that different?
No, I don't think so. I think when you strip it down, it's about people. It's a business of people. It's a business of relationships. I think no matter whether you're working with a 17 or 16-year-old kid, or you're working with, 24, 25-year-old, young men, with the world team, the Team Canada going to China for 3 weeks with some 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-olds, it's still the same, the relationships. And even though I didn't know those kids, and we had to get together and meet them and get to know them in a short period of time, it's still the same. It's still building a relationship. And whether you go into a coffee shop and you meet someone and you build a conversation up, it's the same principles. You're presenting yourself, who you are, what your kind of personality and philosophy is. And obviously when you're coaching, there's some kind of expectation as a coach that you have for your players. And on the same token, you're getting to know the kid, not just about their football skills, but about them personally. How do they learn? How do they react to, coaching? Whether you're a stern coach or a pretty laid back coach, how do they respond to you when, things get tough and stuff like that? And it's about, understanding them. And I guess for me, it's when you broke it down, whatever level, you're right. I have had opportunity to kind of coach in all different levels. And it was really always about the people. It was really always about the players and the coaches and the relationship that you build with them. And whether you had 5 years to do it or you had 5 weeks, it's really the same principles. You kind of approach it, in the same way of meeting a stranger. You present kind of yourself and who you are and kind of what your expectations are, and you kind of open up. I guess if you try to be enclosed and closed door, and you're never going to reach these kids. I think the biggest thing with coaching is that they want to trust you. They have to trust you. If you want to get the best out of kids, they got to believe that you care about more about winning. You care about them. And not so much about their football success. Like, you obviously want to care and you want them to be as successful as possible, but really just as people, that you actually literally care about them, that you want what's best for them. And if they see that, I think you get the most out of them. And really for me, that's when you strip it down, that's really what it was about. It was about the people.
Again, Coach, I love the simplicity of that. And I love how you sort of tied it all up back to this idea of it's the development of people. And that's really what coaching is, right? Management, whatever you want to call it, it really is the development of people. And I love that you talked about the importance of developing trust, that in order to truly be the effective leader, you really have to build that trust first. So I'm curious with you, because you're so people driven and athlete driven, was there something that you really focused on doing initially to really start to buid the trust with, whether it be with players, whether it be with other coaches, parents? Was there anything that you really consciously did?
Yeah, I think for me, so if you look back when I first got the job at the University of Windsor, in 2010, I was an assistant coach under Coach Morency, and I was kind of responsible for recruiting and things like that. And then right in the middle of recruiting season, obviously they decided to make a move and do a national search and all that kind of stuff. Well, I was still under contract. It was around January, February, and I was under contract till April or May. So really, I had a responsibility to continue to recruit when there was so much unknown, and I would get into a living room with a parent and they'd be like, well, who's the head coach? And I'd be like, well, I'm not sure. And then they'd be like, well, are you going to be there? And I said, well, I'm not sure. And I think for me, I got feedback from some of the kids that decided to come to the University of Windsor, and ultimately, it led to me being the coach there. And whether we get into that conversation or not, ultimately, the feedback was that they trusted me, that I was recruiting them for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. There was no selfishness there. I basically sold the school. I sold my experience as a player there. And I basically said that, listen, like, if I'm here or not, I want the best players here. I want the program to be successful. And really, that's what I tried to sell to recruits. And ultimately, the ones, I think we had a big class that year. It was about 32 kids with basically no head coach at the time. And I was able to bring those kids in. And then when I got the job, really for me, you do the PowerPoint presentation, you get to meet the kids and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, the first thing I put on the board was, I won't lie to you. And that was the most important thing to me, that in the past, I've always been in situations where, the coach only tells the kids so much. They only, share what they're supposed to share, or, kind of sometimes don't always give them the ultimate truth. I was always like, you know what? I'm going to tell you the truth. You may not enjoy what you hear, but it's going to be honest. And I'm not going to lie to you, because that's where you lose the trust, right? Where you say something and then you don't do it. You don't follow through. And whether it was disciplining a player for not attending workouts, or a kid coming in your office and asking you where he stands with the program, or, cutting a kid or doing anything like that, I tried to be as honest as possible. The conversations obviously didn't always go as well as maybe the kid expected or wanted. I've had situations where parents have come into my office and wonder why their kid doesn't play and all that. And, sometimes I'm more than brutally honest that, maybe they didn't expect me to be that way. They maybe sugarcoated a little bit or something like that. And I just wanted to be open where the kids saw that, hey, he's being honest with us. Like, man, I don't like the answer, but I'm going to respect the fact that he didn't lie to me and didn't say one thing and then did another thing. And that's really something that I tried to do. And that was probably the most important thing to me. Now, as my 8 years went on, like, those were tested. Those were things that were tested. And I'm not going to say that I was always that way. You get to a point, sometimes you get tested, and sometimes maybe, we mentioned that you sway from that a little bit. And in retrospect, you look back and you're like, yeah, I probably should have made a stronger or quicker decision there than I did. And it affects your locker room. It affects your players. And maybe they don't always tell you that it affects you, but you can see it. You can see that, when the trust goes away a little bit, or they stop like believing everything that comes out of your mouth, then that's where the challenges are faced as a coach. And you start to go, I got to bring these guys back. I got to find a way for them to trust you, because ultimately, I don't think you can win without trust. I don't think you can be successful, maybe have spurts and have your moments, but I think long-term, if a player doesn't go there every day and have ultimate trust in their coach and believe that he's doing what's best for him, then I think ultimately you're not going to get everything from that player. He's always going to be in a little bit of reserve or cautious about doing something because he's scared that something you're going to lie to him, or you're not getting what maybe you're saying that you're going to give to them and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm at. Probably the most important thing was being honest with them and having that trust being built right off the bat.
And two things really jumped out as you shared that. You were mentioning, and one thing I really got a sense is your growth mindset, right? That, really comes back to one of my favorite quotes, is that Nelson Mandela quote, that I never lose. I either win or I learn. So you talked about how, you've had those, instances where you've stuck to the honesty and right, win. And then you've had those opportunities to remind you, you know what, I want to do a better job of this. So I just really love that ability to have that growth mindset, to be objective with yourself. The other thing which really stuck out to me was what makes a great coach. You talked about honesty. And why I love that is the best coaches, from my experience, are not always the ones that tell you what you want to hear, but they are the ones that tell you what you need to hear. And I love that, because it all comes back to your honesty, that you were very transparent. You were honest with the athletes. They might not necessarily want to hear, but it was serving their heart and getting them, and at least giving them the opportunity to get better from that conversation.
Yeah. And I think ultimately it doesn't always work out. Yeah. Ultimately the players don't always, like to trust. Some kids nowadays, they don't, despite being honest and stuff like that. It was funny because, that was very important to me. And again, like, you have your values and moments where you kind of forget those values and you kind of go away, and then you have to be reminded. And I self-reflect. Obviously, it's a lot easier to self-reflect when you're out of it than it is in the moment and things like that. And I guess in retrospect, I wish I was a little more self-reflecting in the moments. And I had people that I had mentors that, would remind me sometimes and say, things like that. But, ultimately for me, it's really about, if you continue to be honest and do those things, the kids, they're going to respect you, you know what I mean? And again, they may not like what you have to say, but they can't be mad at you, because you're honest with them. You know what I mean? In the real world, like, I try to teach kids that, some job, when you go for it, they're not going to tell you you were really good, things like that, and all these good things, but we didn't give you the job. They're ultimately going to tell you where you lack or where your deficiencies are. And I think the biggest thing nowadays is people, really have a hard time looking at themselves and finding deficiencies. I think people really have a hard time with that. And again, I'm not saying I'm not like that. It's easier for me now as a coach to dissect myself and say, these were my deficiencies. I have no problem talking about my past at the University of Windsor and the mistakes that I made. And I got no problem seeing those mistakes now, but there are a lot of people that don't do that. They're not willing to look at those things. And I just find that you're not going to grow, even as a player or as a coach, unless you're willing to do that. And unless you're, willing to look in the mirror and say, hey, where are my faults? What do I need to improve on? And it's not hard to recognize. Oftentimes people tell you what your faults are. People have no problem telling you, hey, you're stubborn, or, you're not willing to do this. You're not willing to listen to the players. And what's funny is we talk about relationships and trust. In my 8 years at the University of Windsor, and again, no matter what you did, as far as, building relationships with the kids and all that stuff, the worst evaluations I always got was communication. Always. And you talk to other coaches at the University of Windsor, everyone's evaluation, though you can be like, and I'm talking about like championship coaches, communication. No matter what you did, like even you get a bad communication evaluation, the next year you're like, okay, we're gonna have weekly meetings, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have a communication board, we're gonna do all this. Next year, communication's still low. And it's always, and again, it's sometimes the generation of how they look at communication, because it's not what they want to hear, therefore it's bad communication. And that's the big difference. It's like, it's not communication like a conversation, it's communication like, I want to hear something, you didn't tell me that, therefore it's terrible communication. It's like, well, no, communication is a two-way street. We're having a conversation. I'm sharing information with you so you can process it and then follow through with that information. But that's not really how they look at it. They look at it like, okay, you told me something, didn't really like it, so therefore you are a bad communicator. And that's kind of like where I've kind of realized that, okay, at some point you can only do so much, and you hope that the kids kind of grasp it and things like that. But I really found that's where some of the challenges lie, that no matter what you did, you still weren't accepted as like a good communicator. And it's like, okay, and you can only do so much, and you just continue to kind of follow that same path that you feel like is important and right.
And what I love that, and what I heard from that is it's the ability to trust yourself, right? And not be swayed by the opinions of others, right? And that's where you got to take things with a grain of salt sometimes. And like you said, self-reflect, and that's the most powerful thing we can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So one of the things, again, the more I get to know you, the more I really like the journey, again, because it's unique, it's different. And before getting into that role as the head coach of Windsor, you had not been in a head coaching role. And, in 2018, you decided to step away from the game. I'm curious, you have definitely taken the road less traveled to get to where you want to go. What has been the biggest takeaway for you as you've really, you've blazed your own path in life, brother? So I'm kind of curious, what's been the biggest takeaway from all these experiences?
I think for me, it's really one thing I've tried to do as a coach, and again, the self-reflecting later and stuff like that is really, I guess, to a fault, to be honest, to a fault sometimes when it comes to, I guess, the coaching aspect. And, people always say like, head coaches and, having assistant coach and all that. I always wanted to give people opportunity, because I was given an opportunity. There's 27 head coaching jobs in youth sports across the country. And I was given one of those opportunities. Truthfully, probably by default. I don't know if most people know my story. When the applications, went out for the head coaching job, I didn't apply. Again, my resume would be pushed aside with my 5 years of coaching experience, high school level, couple coordinator jobs, coaching, positional coaches at the, and OC at the Ravens, but being, I think, a high school head coach twice. One year I went 0-8 as a head coach, so it was like one of those things that's, the resume would have went by. So I really didn't have any aspirations, though there's always that dream of being a head coach at the youth sports level. It wasn't something that I believe would ever happen. I went to that program in 2010 because I wanted to help, and people used to criticize me a little bit. Why'd you go? Like, why are you coaching there? and at that point, people were like, well, they got to change the coaches and do all this stuff. Why are you going there? You're going to get lumped in, blah, blah, blah. I always just answer like, because I want to make a difference. I don't want to be the person standing back here criticizing the program. I want to go help. And if I can go help, and I played for Coach Morency, I have a great relationship with Coach Morency, and I wanted to go help. So once they made a change, I just continued to try to help. And then, Gord Grace, who I'm forever thankful, came to me one day. I was still working at the school board and basically juggling both gigs. And he came to me and said, can you come to my office after work? And I said, sure. So I rolled in there, and he asked me if I would be the interim head coach. And, at that time, I really had no thought process behind it. And, I kind of said, well, if I don't do it, what are you going to do? And they didn't at that moment really have a plan. They did a search. They had, 2 or 3 candidates, but it took a long time. And unfortunately, at the university level, the process takes a long time. A lot of red tape, a lot of union, getting people together for committees and all that kind of stuff. And people just took other jobs. And ultimately, they were kind of in limbo. And, I joke around. I said, well, I have to ask my wife permission. I have to make sure she's cool with it.
Yeah.
And I had to go to the board, and I just started at the board. I had to ask if I could take a leave, and they were generous enough. And the relationships that I built there, I asked if I could take a 9-month leave when I just got the job, and they granted me that opportunity. And I basically looked at it like it was a 9-month job application. I basically said to myself, I would never get this job, but if I go and do this job, they can't say I'm not capable of doing it. So I really kind of attacked it in that sense. And at that point, it was like, yeah, I'd love to keep this job, but I never really thought that was an option, I guess. I really thought like Joe's going to hold fort for 9 months. We were coming off a 2-6 season. If we're lucky to win some games, great. And then we'll go do a national search in November and try to get, the right candidate here. So I really I attacked it. I went to get a staff. I quickly put one together with people that I trusted, that I had relationships with, that I knew that they weren't out in it for any other reason besides A, the University of Windsor trying to be successful, and B, doing it for me, basically coming out and helping me. And we went there, we attacked it, and we were lucky enough to go to the semifinals in my first year. And ultimately after that, it's hard. I was lucky enough to win Coach of the Year in the OUA, and it was hard for them obviously to go in a different direction. So I was, ultimately, blazed my path there and things like that. But when I started coaching at the U, it was really more of like, let's give other guys opportunities. And I, as assistant coaches, I tried to give guys opportunities. Steve worked for me. Snyder is one of his first gigs, Coach Snyder. And I still remember when Coach Snyder was offered the offense coordinator position at St. FX. And he's working for pennies for me and basically put in 70, 80 hours a week. And, I knew Steve was going to be a head coach in the OUA. It was only a matter of time. Mm-hmm. And you could just see his work ethic and his incredible, love for the game. And he didn't want to go to St. FX. There was way more money. It was a promotion. He just loved what we were doing and wanted to stay. But I was like, dude, like, you gotta go. Like, if I could pay you more or do more, I would, but I just can't. And you have to take these gigs if you want to be. And he ultimately went, had a great career there, a couple of years, ended up back at Western. And then now, obviously, I'm so happy for him that he's, obviously doing great things at Queens. And, just any other coach that kind of came in, Coach Flamia, came in from Laurier, and I was able to get him, and he was a full-time assistant for me for 3 years. Coach Alexander got his first opportunity to be a defense coordinator with me. Pete Frazier, who came, I brought in, as my defensive coordinator, and then a year later, he got the Mount Allison head coaching job. And, those were gigs that, like, Coach Carter, things like that. Like, I was always open. I was never mad at a guy if he left. I actually tried to push them to go because I wanted people to develop. I didn't want to be selfish in the sense of like, we're winning, I don't want you to leave. I wanted people to grow, and because someone gave me a chance. Gord Grace took a chance on me, with no experience. And I still remember, we had a newspaper writer here in Windsor. He doesn't write anymore, Bob Duff. sports writer, and he wrote a pretty nasty newsletter when I got the job, like pretty much saying like it's a joke. I remember I got hired on basically April Fool's, and he made a joke about it being an April Fool's joke, like that I got the job at Windsor. And he wrote a nice newsletter after the season, basically, kind of eating crow and kind of saying that and stuff like that. But ultimately, it wasn't something that was popular. The choice wasn't popular to people. They thought it was like really a joke, or has no experience, you'll never be successful. And you know what I mean? But for me, I never really looked at it that way. I looked at it like, hey, I'm going to try to help my program, my alumnus program, alumni win. And ultimately, if I don't, I'm going to try to put it in the best position available for the next guy. And, ultimately I stayed there for 8 years. And even though we didn't win at the end, I really felt, looking at it, that the program was in a better position. Nationally, it was more recognizable. We went to the playoffs for 4 years. Obviously with me working with Team Canada and Team Ontario, we built more of a brand, which, University of Windsor was never really known for working with those kind of, programs before and stuff like that. So I think I'm happy where it's at. I even said in my press release, I wish we won more games. Everyone does, and things like that. But I think it's in a good position. I think, Coach Cercelli's going to do an amazing job once things get rolling there. And it's one of those things that it's a unique path. And now no matter what I do, I try to if I have the opportunity to give people a chance to grow as a coach, then I try to do that. So even as a Ravens offense coordinator, if I can allow one of my assistant coach to call plays, a little bit, or do this, or maybe at practice, I allow him to do all the play calling and all that kind of stuff. I just want people to get a chance because someone basically took a chance on me. And then ultimately I try to do that with other people now.
And I love that. And again, it speaks volumes because I've never heard you share that. But what I really heard from you was really you're so focused on leaving things better than when you got there, right? Like leaving people with the impression of increase, of really helping elevate others to get them to where they want to go. And that's what great leaders do. So I love that you're just so focused on just helping and serving others. And it's great that you have that clarity. So again, kudos to you, brother.
Oh, appreciate it.
So I'm curious, we stepped away from the game in terms of coaching around the same time, at fall of 2018. I'm curious, what has been the biggest growth for you in terms of stepping away, in terms of reflection? What have you really learned about yourself and the game of life in this new adventure in life?
For me, it probably is just what's important. You look at it, what's important, and my stress level is way lower than it used to be, and stuff like that. But really, for me, it's just about what was important. And when I got the job, I mentioned in one of the articles, I wanted to be the coach for 20 years. I couldn't imagine doing anything else besides coaching football. It was just such a dream job. And people say, well, it's amazing and you get to coach football for a living and all that kind of stuff. But really for me, when I stepped away, it was really ultimately about my family and my girls and my wife and being with them. I still kind of tell, my wife, when I was just getting the job, my youngest was born my first season after we beat Laurier in the kick-in, kick-out game on a Monday up in Laurier, which was one of probably the best wins I've ever had as a coach. I had my youngest child the next day. But I still remember my wife had a video, and my daughter was pretty young and just a baby, and she's walking around the bedroom with my Lancer sweater, and she kept saying, "This is Daddy," and she kept pointing to the logo and giving the logo a kiss and all that stuff. And really for her, that's what she knew me as, and that really kind of hit home in a retrospective, that's what my daughter knew me of, was that I was a symbol a football logo basically, because I worked. I wasn't home. I coached a lot. I traveled a lot. And then ultimately I got to a point where it was like, you're raising two young women. When they grow up, you want them to meet a man that's a family man and all that stuff. And was I ultimately the best example for them of someone that I would love to see them, have in their lives. So I kind of made a tough decision. And I'm not saying that coaches are not like that. I'm not saying like putting down other coaches that have chose to be in the field and all that kind of stuff. It's just for me personally. This is my own personal thing that I felt that ultimately my family was more important than any job or anything I did. And I just wanted to be around more. Now, maybe if you look at it now and you ask my kids, I'm probably around too much. I have the summers off and I'm home by 3 o'clock every day, and ultimately things like that, jokingly. But it was something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be around during these impressionable years. And people ask me again, are you going to go back to coaching? Like, would you ever coach at the university level again? And maybe, again, not as a head coach, but maybe, as a coordinator or a positional guy, like when my kids are older and they, ultimately, don't need me anymore in that sense. But right now it was really just what was important to me. And ultimately that's what led me to the decision. And after the 8 years, I realized, and my youngest daughter really loved my football team. She loved the players. They treated her with the utmost respect. I used to host a Thanksgiving dinner every year for all the players that couldn't go home. So I have 20, 25 players. And when I told her, the day I told her I wasn't going to coach anymore, she got mad at me and said, "Are you telling me we're not having Thanksgiving dinner anymore?" And that was the first thing out of her mouth. Like, that was a big thing for her. It was important. She loved being around them. They played cards with her. They treated her, again, like my kids always were treated really well by the players. And ultimately, they didn't have to. They were 20 years old. They were 5 and 6 years old. They didn't ultimately have to, spend time with them, but they did. They colored with them. They did things with them. But again, that was limited because of my work. So I really wanted to change that. And I guess that's really what I took out of it, that where my priorities lied and what was important to me has changed in the last 10 years. And now I look at my life and you start to, focus on your health. You get older and focusing on that, and obviously your kids, and, and I love what I do now. I love the job I have and the people that I impact now, beyond coaching. And that's really what's important to me.
And just hearing your story, what I really took away from it was your priorities can change, right? And that's okay. And that's part of the game of life. And I know from my own experience how challenging that is, especially because we can get so caught up in the status quo of following a certain path. It takes a lot of courage to be able to hit pause and to choose a different path. So again, brother, like, I acknowledge you for having the courage to take, that different path and take some new actions and prioritizing, family.
Appreciate it. And again, I don't look at it and say, well, maybe it was a bad decision, or maybe I should have did this. Where I am right now in my life, and I'm 45 years old. I started coaching at the U when I was 34. Like I said, I just had my second child and all that kind of stuff, and really ultimately started coaching at around 26, 27. I don't regret any of it. I still can coach. I still have a passion for it, and I can still get my fix, so to speak. Yeah. But I enjoy summer football in a sense of, it's not overly demanding. We go 2 days a week and we have games. It gets me out of the house. It gets me doing something different. I like the schematic aspect of football still. I love it. The X's and O's, especially as a coordinator, scheming and coming up with different things and stuff like that. And I haven't lost that passion for coaching. I just kind of, like you mentioned, I kind of prioritized differently. I rearranged the order of what was important to me. Football never came off that list. It just, at one point it was probably, unfortunately, sometimes it became number one. It became a number one priority. And then I kind of just rearrange that to a point where, maybe it's 4 or 5 now on the list, but it's still important to me and it's still part of who I am. But I guess, you use the term, it doesn't define me anymore, as my child, once thought. I mean, it doesn't define me as who I am. It's just something I do. And, I want to be more known as, like you kind of mentioned, how I perceive, relationship wise with people and how I interact and stuff like that. I want to be remembered more about that than, oh yeah, he's the head coach of the University of Windsor. Like that's kind of, where I want to kind of be different in that sense.
Oh, again, great advice. So I have one last question for you, Coach.
Go ahead.
So depending on when people are watching this, right, we're coming out of an interesting time in human history, but regardless, challenges, obstacles, setbacks are part of the game of life. Not that we want to expect them, but we understand that they will come up from time to time. I'm curious, what is one piece of advice, one insight that you would offer someone if they're going through a challenging time in their life, something that they could take action on today to help get them back on their feet, to start creating some positive momentum and get them back on their path so they can pursue their journey to greatness?
Well, again, something else I kind of, live by and try to tell my kids. And again, it's always hard, but I always kind of said that, only you are responsible for your own happiness. So you can't expect other people to make you happy. People can do that and all that stuff, but ultimately, oftentimes people are just waiting for someone else to make them happy. It's like, I've kind of looked at it like, hey, if you're not happy with what you're doing, if your job or, maybe your health or whatever it is, it starts with you. You have to make that choice. And ultimately, the only way you're going to be happy is if you make a change. Someone can't make a change for you. And there are going to be challenges. It's going to be tough. I mentioned to you before, we got on that I start running. It doesn't feel good. It hurts. It's physically demanding, but I'm trying, I'm doing it and I'm taking my time. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And ultimately, the more success you have, the better you feel and the easier it becomes and the more you want to do. And that's kind of like how life is, as you get, I try to tell kids, you get a good grade, kind of snowballs a little bit, you get another good grade, and then all of a sudden you're feeling good and you're confident. And that's coaching and that's players and anything that you do in life, the more confident you are, the more successful you're going to be because you're prepared and you're invested and all that kind of stuff. So really for me, it's just, it has to really start with you. You have to kind of make that decision. We go back to looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself and looking in the mirror and saying, hey, why am I not happy? Or what's with this challenge that's causing me so many problems? And if you're willing to identify the issues, maybe there's multiple ones, but you take one of those issues and you attack it and you change it. And if it makes a difference, great. If it doesn't, maybe you have to get, attack some of the multiple concerns and stuff like that. And ultimately, if you do it all and you're still not happy, then maybe that's really wasn't the problem in the first place. But I think you got to really look in the mirror and say, hey, why am I not happy? And, do something about it. But I really believe it starts with you. I think if you're waiting for someone else to make that change for you, it's just going to be hard and you'll be more disappointed and things like that. I think you start with yourself. What can I do to make myself happy? And then you kind of take that step and that's what I did. My last year, it was tough. And I kind of said, am I going to continue to do this and not really be ultimately happy? Or say, well, what's going to make me happy? I want to be home. I want to be with my kids. I want to, be around more. And ultimately I pulled the trigger. Wasn't easy. Made a tough choice and gave up, something I love doing, but ultimately I'm happy. And it made a big difference in my life. And, I kind of approach life now and my jobs or anything that I'm doing that I want to make sure ultimately that I'm happy first, and it starts with me doing the things that will make me happy.
Love the simplicity of advice, and it's just such, the power of decision is what I really heard from that. So, Coach, maybe there's another coach, maybe some of your your coaching colleagues, maybe they're former players that are hearing this, that are watching this, that want to connect or reconnect with you? What is the best way for people to engage with you?
Oh, well, I don't know. Like anyone can reach out to me. Ultimately, most of my colleagues, I think, my big thing for me was when I left, I sent a message out to all my colleagues and said like, hey, I enjoyed being with them and working with them, and I'm still connected with a lot of my former coaches and stuff like that. We talk. I'm always willing to reach out. Relationships, I think people get caught up in the, they don't want to be the one to reach out, or they don't want to, oh, that person's probably busy and stuff. And, and they are, but I got no problem messaging them. You know what I mean? If they're busy, they can't talk. And I understand that, especially coaches and this time of year and things like that. But, I have a Facebook, account and I'm friends with most of those guys, but I love talking to my old colleagues. I love getting together. We actually got together on a Zoom call. They still invite me. They're some of the young coaches. I'm not the young guy anymore, but when I first started, I was one of the young guys, but they still invite me. A couple of my good friends, Adam Grandy, and they still message me, hey, we're getting on a Zoom call tonight. You're welcome to get on. And that means a lot to me. I've been out 3 years and they still think of inviting me and getting on. And, to me, it's just, jibber jab, and we have some fun and we talk, and they're talking about football and their league and stuff. And I enjoy, and they ask me, my opinion on things and things like that. But I still get a chance, and really being involved in the summer, the OPFL and the Essex Ravens really allows me to connect with those guys because they're obviously recruiting, and I get to see them, and some of them coach in the OPFL. Cambridge Lions has some Laurier guys, and ultimately things like that, I get to see them. So really for me, I've always kind of been pretty open to people reaching out to me. I think people realize that I'm not one of those hard people to get a hold of. If you want to talk to me, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and I'm pretty good at responding to people. I've always that was important to me, even as a coach. If I got an email, I pretty much responded right away, and I would get responses like, whoa, oh, thanks for the quick response. Because I think ultimately most people think that, they're going to sit for a week and wait for someone to get back to them or something like that. So I was always like a text or a phone call, and I'm always quick to kind of return people's calls because I enjoy the relationships. I enjoy having the simple conversations, actually on the phone or face to face. I enjoy the old fashioned communication as opposed to texting back and forth or messaging through Facebook and stuff like that. I really enjoy the verbal conversations, and whether it's a ride home from work, I'll pick up the phone and call one of my old colleagues and have a 15-20 minute conversation about their program, what they're doing, and ultimately, and that is important to me to continue with those kind of relationships throughout.
Oh, great. That's great. So, Coach, what I wanted to do was I really wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the man you are, the husband you are, the great dad you are, the great coach and mentor, but most importantly, the great human being you are. The one thing that I've really come to appreciate about you is how much value you place on developing great relationships and really connecting human to human. It's such a powerful reminder to me about what the game of life is really about. It's about human connection and building trusting relationships. So thank you for reminding me about what this is all about.
Well, again, I appreciate GT, and even the short time that we've had, our relationship, I've gotten a lot out of it. I could see your passion, even when we met through the interview process and stuff like that, I could just see the passion and really about, for you, it's the same thing. It's about the relationships that you meet and build with people. And you're so lucky to have this kind of platform where you get to sit every day with, a bunch of successful people that, share their traits and share their ideas. And then you get to kind of share it with the world and all that stuff. So yeah, again, JT, I hope, we continue our relationship and things like that. And again, I appreciate you having me on the show today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. So here's my challenge to you, whether you're watching, whether you're listening. Coach offered so many valuable nuggets of wisdom. And my challenge to you is take one of these ideas and act on them. As Coach said, you have to make that decision and you have to choose, right, to make a change. So take one of those nuggets of information and apply it to your life today. And when you do that and you consistently do that, that is where you will achieve your next level of greatness. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you next time in the huddle.